by semester. Great. By semester, basically, it was like, yeah, I basically do this all day. I call people on the phone. I work with these companies. They're looking for talent, and what would that look like for them? And then I get paid, obviously, when someone gets placed. And I said, great, maybe I could do that too. So I jumped into recruitment headfirst. And what I love most about it was this idea of the fact that like I get to work with people one-on-one. I realized that that was something that I truly enjoyed, right? The kind of dynamic of the conversation. You guys can probably tell I talk very quickly and fast, and I found this to be somewhat natural in terms of like the engagement that I had, even working as a 21, 22-year-old for the very first time in like a professional corporate setting. So I worked initially in recruitment, financial services, a lot of like the big banks, hedge funds, stuff like that. There for about a year, did really, really well. But I kind of dealt with some of the culture of, I guess, some of these shops that run this way, especially third party kind of agency recruitment firms that say things like, and I quote verbatim, because you don't forget things like this. Yeah, hang up the phone if somebody says visa, right? Or like, oh yeah, no, not that person because the resume is 14 pages. I'm like, who cares? Just next. And I got used to seeing potentially some of the worst ways to run a business culture-wise, internally, and then of course, like spending-wise, like having staff in a place where nobody wants to be, forcing kind of office hours, and you're spending, let's say, and this is over a decade ago, but you're spending as a CEO, as a company, as a business, $55,000 per month on office space, just so you can look at everybody in the eye. Now, granted, this is before obviously COVID and the whole kind of like remote first movement and all those things. But even back then, I was like, that's a lot of money. And then you've got salaries. I mean, like overhead is so high. So funny enough, many years later, when I started something on my own, I was like, I can't do that. And quite simply, I don't want to. So that became sort of the ethos of everything that I built moving forward. After recruitment, I got into kind of the nonprofit world and jumped to Teach for America. And I did that for about 2 years, which I don't know if anyone here is familiar with TFA, but it's like, yeah, I see Sam kind of nodding along. Awesome. Yeah, so there for about 2 years, essentially, you're kind of like in the Peace Corps. That's what I always equated it to, but you're in this kind of low economic um, area and generally inner city, and you're working with like what they call a Title I school, which is a school that's generally failing from an academic standpoint. So when I entered, I was teaching like eighth grade math, seventh and eighth graders, which everyone can imagine is a lot of fun teaching equations. Like they didn't care. Did I care? And that's a joke. Of course I cared. And but we're there every single day, and the proficiency level when you first enter, it was about 10%. So you have your work cut out for you as an educator at that point. And what I saw at the end of that year was essentially people that I work with very closely in staff. There's about 36% attrition rate, which I remember very vividly because everybody quit almost at the end of the year. So I don't know if it was planned or whatever the case, and I knew how difficult it was for me every month, and I realized there wasn't a support system, there was no feedback, there was nothing for me to grow specifically as an educator. It was just, and they used to say this thing, it was like, if you survive year one, great. And I'm like, what kind of job is this? Like, it's not war, is it? And that's really what some folks would equate it to, and that's really, really sad because it shouldn't be that kind of environment. But I mean, and again, you'll see the logos here. I'm going to each one now, but I'm really glad it happened that way because that point was very pivotal into everything that would come next for the next 5, 6, 7 years for me. And when I saw that this problem that was pervasive to myself and so many others didn't really have a solution, or at least immediately, it drove me to dive into like it just drove me to go into some research specific as to why teachers were quitting. And it was the exact same reasons that I was feeling. So looking at like the thing that I wanted to build next was trying to solve for my own problem. And that's where my very first company, which you see here on the upper left-hand corner, Tier Social, happened. And essentially what it was just a peer-to-peer learning platform. And the whole idea was like, you get a support system, you get a mentor, you get someone who's been doing this longer than you have. So for me, I was an eighth grade math educator. Could I connect to somebody that's been doing it for 10, 12, 18, 20 years, who can then give me a tip on, hey, here's our classroom management, here's what you can do, or hey, if you have questions specifically on lesson planning, what does that look like? And eventually this thing evolves into what I like to call now a hybrid of like LinkedIn for educators mixed with TaskRabbit, because I was also spending 6 hours every Saturday trying to create lesson plans that no one ever looked at, nobody ever gave me feedback on. And I thought, what if I could just outsource some of that with a little bit of money? And it created this infinite cycle of teachers essentially helping each other out at different levels. And you weren't constrained by the borders of your school or the professional development those mass generated. And then got really lucky. I did that while teaching for 2 years. And at the end of essentially my tenure at TFA, we got interest, my partner and I completely bootstrapped everything. And we got a couple of LOIs, some partnerships, some schools. And we got some interest from, funny enough, like a competing shop with an expat. And he said, you guys have built some really cool thing, but we've got 5 years ahead, basically. Here's where we're at, and we'd like to acquire you. And I said no, because I don't want to sit there for the next 5 years, honestly, to be completely blunt when I tell that story. And I said, how about you buy us out, and what would that look like? And a couple months later, we essentially sold the IP and moved on. Shortly after that, got another job, and I was like, I like working with people, but I have capital, so let me see kind of what I'd like to do next. And I came across a company that did career development coaching. And in a similar fashion to like being an educator and being someone, it's really being a support system for someone else. That was a really interesting take, and like I'd not done it before. I joined a company called Pathrise. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that company, but they've got like a Series A, and they essentially work with people that are already in tech or looking to break into tech from other industries. A lot of it is focused on like software engineering and focused on kind of junior talent, but then it kind of expanded to other areas. So my core like functionality there was working with product managers and strategy and operational folk. And again, did that for about a year. And I think for anybody here, obviously, I imagine we're all business owners. So you make one business happen once, you're probably going to want to do the other one again. And where you see inefficiencies, you create obviously another way to say, like, maybe can I do this faster, better, cheaper, and so on and so forth. And that was kind of the birth of Alta, which is the current company at play. And that one right now, we're bootstrapped again, because that's just how we do it. And we're on track to do about $1 million by essentially, well, end of this year, by January 2025 AR. And then we've got 2 more projects that are coming up. So one of them is this thing called SkillServe, which we're looking to launch in Q2 of 2024. So literally in a few months. And then this is just, for now, it's really an idea that's slowly kind of forming, developing. The 523 company, which is really going to deal next year, ideally, in more of along the side of like the buy and sell side of businesses and brokering deals for potentially whatever kind of industry we're looking at. But that's really, really early. But of course, we had to throw the logo up just in case to make this presentation super official. So far, so good. Cool. Awesome. Also, this is what I used to look like. This is before I had a kid 8 months ago, and I was tan and healthy, and yeah, good stuff.
One question before you move on about the first business. LOI is letter of intent, right? Like when like buyer offers. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. I thought you had a question about my tan, and I was like, it was Mexico. That's literally, I've used this picture for like 5 years, because look at me right now. It's like Casper the Unfriendly Ghost. Like, here we go. So we're talking about lean business models, right? Everybody, I think, has an idea around like what lean is conceptually, right? And I'm sure how many of us read Eric Weiss like lean startup book, right? So there's something to said to the benefit of doing that. And obviously everyone here, again, I checked with Eric, and I was like, everyone's bootstrapped, right? Just to make sure. And he goes, yeah, if you got funding, you don't make it inside Thrive. I said, great, man. And I never heard him be so stern. Like I was driving, and like my hands started shaking. And here's the thing about lean businesses. The great thing about it is that it's built on efficiency. I think that's probably, I would equate that to, at least from my experiences, has been the kind of key ingredient. And that's efficiency from an operational standpoint, that's efficiency from a capital standpoint, especially, and also just in terms of like your own decision making. Now, starting lean, has anyone ever seen this graphic before? Good, yes, no, all right, whatever. So essentially with this, it's essentially a 3-pronged model, right? So if you look at learn, build, measure, if you look at something lean, your first step really should be like, again, where's the market? What does that look like? Can I learn specifically from some of the potential customers, right? What are the pain points? And this is just your initial phase. Then you build. And when we say we build, we don't go for the big one, but it's really just the MVP. And it's the first iteration of like, if this existed and more fleshed out, what would that look like? And can you, of course, the most important aspect of it, can you sell it? And then at which point, once you do, you can then measure what that looked like in terms of feedback, surveys, success, whatever that could look like for your product, right? What are reviews looking like? And then you iterate it along the way. But the lean build measure model, for me anyway, has proven time and time again, because it also has allowed for very, very quick execution. And it's one of those things where I've seen this, and I've also experienced this myself in terms of like in the beginning of not having a lot of experience with this stuff. I think there's this very easy trap to fall into for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, especially first time, which is the analysis paralysis, which is, what this company is doing this, like I could never do that. And if I do, like, what's that going to look like? And we spend 3 months thinking, and then another 3 months making a website, and another 3 months, all of a sudden it's a year later, and you're like, what'd you do? You saw it once? No, but now we're ready. Like I've done that in a sense, to a similar degree, and it sucks. Because then you look back and you're like, wow, we wasted so much time, and all I had to do was make a LinkedIn post once. I could have gotten 5 customers, right? So the whole lean aspect of it, I think, goes, if you think about it as a methodology, not just how you're going to create the business, but I think also you as yourself as a founder is how you're going to operate. So I was kind of put those two things in hand. I don't have a slide for this one, but it's like efficiency plus execution. Question so far?
There's one in the chat, Albano. Tyler says, how do you model financials before you begin your company in terms of pro forma, TAM, SAM, SOM?
It's a really good question. I'm going to touch on financials in a little bit. If that's okay, Tyler, could I come back to that question?
I think his mic's not working.
Okay. Yep. No worries. Yeah, it's a really good question. So if, in case I don't touch it again, just Eric, if you can hit me up and just let me know. Okay. So part of that kind of the LBM, learn, build, measure, it's kind of what we said before, right? So you're thinking along the lines of, gathering customer data, clarifying your own idea, building, improving the product based on that data specifically, and testing with customers. Honestly, this last part is the most, I think, important thing. It's also funny enough, you don't always have to follow it, I think, in my opinion, this rigidly. If you literally just go to someone who potentially you identify without doing all the data and stuff like that, and just say like, hey, I feel like you're here, would you buy this? Something can be as simple as that. Somebody say, yes, I would. And that's really exciting, which I'll get to in a second. So benefits of capital efficient business, right? Again, we're not getting funding. We don't have millions in the bank, and we don't have to worry about investors, which is a good thing. Having a capital efficient business allows a couple of things for us, right? So number one, and this is a big majority one for me always, it is around retention in terms of your own company, right? What does your share look like? So if you have more control in your company, you can obviously just say that the direction is going to change any which point in time. One of the big things that I've seen from, and even worked at startups myself, where, the company had taken on a lot of funding, raised money, whatever it was. But what happens if you now all of a sudden owe, right, money, or if you owe X, Y, and Z services, or if you owe at least like attention, then your own direction and your own dictation of what you're going to do next is not going to be affected by everybody else, because guess what? They gave you money for it, right? So I realized when I started the business, I'm like, I wanted to start a business essentially initially, not because I saw a problem that I experienced myself. And it was the idea, I was like, I think for most, they want to start a business to gain the freedom and make money and so on and so forth, right? But it's really to get out of a job. I wasn't a very good employee, to be quite frank. And I thought, hey, maybe I'm better at this stuff because I'm not so good at like staying in this lane specifically. So to then have a company work tirelessly to build it, to bring in other people to then tell you what to do with it, to me just never made much sense. And then of course, if you look at some of like the bigger, let's just say for tech, for example, it's kind of predominantly space. If you look at the stories of founders being exiled into the abyss by their board and things like that, right? It might sound a little bit out there, but I mean, again, I always use this example. I'm like, if they could remove Steve Jobs as Apple is doing its thing, what's going to happen to you, right? Or let's say Adam Newman and all his eccentricities, and Travis Kalanick, and all these kind of now like overly sensationalized, excuse me, the hell was that? CEOs and time again, right? Bigger isn't always better in my opinion. Hence lean. But the whole idea where like asking permission for the next thing you're about to do from the board, and it's like, oh, my board will let me do that, and so on and so forth. I feel like it would get really tedious. And the good thing is you guys will never have to worry about that because you're all here, you're part of Thrive, and it's a very different model of how everything is being built. In terms of growth, right? It creates slower but sustainable growth. So granted, you don't have a massive budget to run ads and go nuts and so on and so forth, right? And it is slower in a sense because maybe you can't test as quickly or as direct, I should say. Running an ad, sometimes you don't really understand how those mechanisms work. I certainly am not an ads expert, but it's like a slot machine, right? You're putting money in, sure, you can get a customer out, maybe not, maybe you're just paying $100 just for impressions, right? And you can lose a lot of money very quickly that way if you yourself don't know how to do it, or if you don't have somebody with you that knows how to do it just as well. Plus, honestly, the whole idea, or like, oh, well, like then Facebook, and I've had this happen, and I've had friends that this happened to, where it's like, oh, they blocked my account, or they shut this down, or they froze this or that. It's a no, right? Again, control, not just in terms of your own company, but again, every other lever that you pull is also really important just to keep in mind. So if you don't have to rely on like the funding that you don't have, you have to get a little bit more creative, to get more strategic around, hey, customer acquisition, what does that look like? Now, again, are you going to explode to 0 to 100K months or $1 million, whatever you want, whatever that magical target may be for you individually? No, it's going to take a while, but it's more sustainable. Because again, if you could press a button and get 1,000 customers, it sounds nice, but then it's, is your company built for that? Are your models built for that? Can you handle that kind of volume? Do you have the expertise to be able to serve 100 people in one day? Like, it doesn't make sense. So it's a little bit slower, but it's better. It's slow incremental growth. And then sometimes eventually over time, and this is not talking a decade from now, but maybe a year or two, right? That hockey stick moment can happen depending on a variety of factors. So control, growth, and then it just forces you, because you don't have a lot, to just get really creative with that stuff. And funny enough, when you push yourself, I think, past that boundary, that's when you realize like there's a lot more to you as well as an entrepreneur in terms of what you can achieve that maybe you didn't take into account before. Fair? Great. Okay. Do we know who this guy is? He's got great hair.
It's the WeWork guy.
Correct. What's his name?
Adam something, I can't remember.
Anybody know it?
I'm going to stick with gray hair guy. I like it.
Great hair guy. I love it. So this is Adam Newman. He's the founder of WeWork. They made a show about him last year, which I recommend to a lot of you if you haven't seen it already, because it's nice to, I imagine some of us, and maybe all of us, always will attract and find ourselves drawn to shows that are about entrepreneurship or business or whatever, because it's relatable, right? We identify with it. They made a show. Jared Leto does a fantastic job portraying him, and it's called We Crashed. It's on Apple TV. But there's this thing they keep saying in the show, and I don't know if you ever said it for real, because the guy liked to burn cash because growth had to happen at scale and rapidly, whatever. And he said, we spend to grow, spend to grow, spend to grow. And eventually what happened with WeWork is this, right? Which happened recently. And it sucks, because if you think about, he got out when he got out and whatever the case was, but think about how many employees were affected by this, right? Think about the fact that at one point, this company was worth valuations, whatever, $47 billion. And then once they IPO'd or were aiming to, I think it was about 6 weeks, they almost went completely bankrupt. I know people that were job search assistants, contractors, right, and consultants that were employed at that point in time, and they said it was one of the most chaotic things they've ever experienced in their lives, because now you have hundreds of people who are like, do we even have work next week? So again, this is, I think, one of the biggest examples, and if not one of the most like famous ones to recent memory, of not doing what all of us are aiming to do. It was growth at all costs, $4.4 billion funding from SoftBank. And while that sounds incredible, if you don't know how to handle that, if you don't know how to manage that, and if your business model alone doesn't allow you to make a profit, which we'll get into a second, what the hell is the point? I think a lot of people, right, idolize Jeff Bezos and again, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. But, look at Mark Zuckerberg, for example. My buddy said this to me yesterday. He's like, he was lightning in a bottle at the right time. Facebook was very revolutionary. But to that end, everyone's got their different targets and whatnot. But if you think about Jeff Bezos, for example, he was working and doing really well for himself before he started Amazon. And not taking anything away, these are incredible companies. But to that end, it's all the same, right? Profitability doesn't happen for years on end. I think for them, it took them 8 years to turn a profit. 8 years. Who can survive that way here? Out of us, that are in this room. 8 years of not earning more than what you're spending. Or in terms of WeWork, it was nonstop spending. They're losing $2.1 million a day at their height. So my whole idea with businesses, I'm like, I'm not trying to lose anything. And I know how that sounds, but the whole idea here, and I'll talk in this and you'll see it on the slide, should be like, how do we generate revenue on day one? And that's kind of the gist of that specifically. Eric said, my landlord would have absolutely evicted me if it took 8 years of profitability. Yeah, like who's waiting around for that stuff, right? And now, with, the layoffs and everything else right now are nuts and where the market is. And obviously there's this kind of looming recession. There's this overhire, right, of workers in 2021. And all these companies are not shutting down because they can't keep up, and AI has affected certain areas. But at its core, at the end of the day, if you think about some of these investors and everybody else, It's nuts to say like, hey, you know who loses money? Everybody, Amazon, Snapchat, Spotify, and the kind of these big names. But you're literally losing money every day. And it's always a run to like the next round, the next funding, the next investor. And me and myself, just as a founder, I'm like, what? Like that seems so unenjoyable. How can you possibly focus on your business, focus on your customers, focus on your growth if you are constantly out of cash? And last example I'll use for this, and we'll put a pin in it. I have a good friend of mine who's been running an ed tech company for about 8 years. And for the first 7, no money whatsoever. And I was subscribed to that newsletter, and I even joined him at one point and was their chief of sales for a couple of weeks. I was like, dude, this is a lot. They have gone to potentially every single apprenticeship program, funding, whatever, like competition, grant, you name it, everything external except the customer. And they've taken that money and they read it on the product 15 times over for no reason. And granted, yes, it's ed tech, so their sales cycles are longer. It's about 9 months, and schools are notoriously difficult to deal with. I don't know if anybody here is an ed tech entrepreneur, but just having been in that space myself initially when I first get go, it's like you can't really sell to schools if you don't have something in the short term to infuse cash into your business, because they will take forever. So I look at these guys' sales cycle, it was something like we have 7 touch points before we get to a decision maker. And I'm like, that you're just doing demos the whole time. I'm like, why don't you just flip it and sell potentially to the consumer instead? Oh, no, that's not what we're built for. 7 years. Now they've gotten funding from a VC company. And I said, hey, congrats on your funding. And he said, yeah, it wasn't really favorable. They're making us move to Indiana. Now, I don't know if anyone's here from Indiana, so no shade whatsoever, but the guy's from New Jersey. So he and his co-founder now had to move to Indiana just to operate their business because someone gave them money to. And I don't know, is anyone here a parent? Nobody? Not as far as you know, Eric. I know, I've heard of you. I always imagine like, what if I had to move out of nowhere? Like my wife and I just bought a home. Our son came, and it's unimaginable to me that someone can pull the strings and say, if you want me to fund you or whatever the case, you got to do this insane thing and move across state lines, move across the country. Plus I'm in New York, so like Indiana, I don't know, kidding. And it's that, right? So the idea around, again, going back to control, and you're here with this theme, and it feels like I'm repeating myself, it's because I really want to drill this down. If you own your customers and you own your sales and you own your revenue and you own your profit, it is lean. It is the way and you can run it any way you want. If you don't want to run anymore and you can sell, you can shut it down, but that control is priceless. No amount of funding to help you get the next customer faster is worth it in the long term. Fair? Okay. Great. So you guys can see this okay? Because I've got you guys on the left side, and I'm just gonna move. Oh, Jesus Christ. Sorry about that. Gotta love technology. There we go. A couple elements in mind when I think of just kind of running things lean. Scrappy is a superpower. Aim to know your maximum CAC, customer acquisition cost, or CAC early, which I always thought, why on earth can somebody think of another acronym to pronounce? Because CAC sounds terrible. Aim for free, settle for low. And what I mean by that essentially is like, if you're running things lean, what are free things you can use? I'm a huge fan of free tools, free trials, free email accounts, whatever it is, because those things you can utilize on the work that someone's already built out, but they're offering this thing for free. Freemium, premium, whatever it is, take advantage of that stuff, always. And again, getting on creative in terms of what that looks like, you can create multiple accounts. You can run multiple free trials of competing softwares, right? If you need, let's say, 3 months of email marketing tools and you don't want to spend a single dollar, right? Or you don't have that dollar. There's always ways to go around this without having to be like, God, I need $10,000 to start my business. It's just simply not true. Tapping into your own skills first. This is just a matter of like identifying specifically what you are good at. All of us here on this webinar, obviously different backgrounds, different skills, different companies, different targets, different outcomes, different track records, and so on and so forth. But tapping your skills first is just a core element of what I always think about is like, what am I good at? What can I do right now? And that also, I think, having a very honest self-audit with yourself around your business can really shorten the timeline of like how many things you have to do and not go overwhelmed by it. It's just, what is my kind of zone of genius, which I don't know if everyone's heard that term, right? What is the lane in which I can stick and drive through every single day while thinking, okay, great, what are the adjacent ones I can essentially turn into, and can I bring other people with me along the way? And the last one is kind of my favorite. It all sucks in the beginning, so get ready. I think the CEO of NVIDIA said this recently in an interview where they had asked him, if you go back, and they've had such massive success with AI and everything else now moving into this space, and I don't know what their recent valuation was or how much they're worth, but it's insane. And they've been at it for a very, very long time. And the interviewer asked him and said, if you go back and ask your 30-year-old self, or excuse me, give some advice to your 30-year-old self, what would you say? And he said, don't do it. Which it literally took me by surprise, because most people be like, oh yeah, like stick it out and like get ready and like it's gonna be hard and don't give up, kind of the platitudes, which are true, and he said, don't do it. Which is profound, because that man is worth a lot of money and has achieved over 25 plus years a massive amount of success. And it's all peaked, I think, at a certain point, unless something crazy happens, next year with them, or this year, I should say, recently. And for him to go back and say, yeah, if I was 30 years, if I could go back and tell my 30-year-old self, like, just don't do this. Don't do it, because the pressure alone is almost immeasurable, and it's something that can cripple you. And because if I knew the amount of time I would waste not seeing my family, not being there for my kids, but I had shareholders, I had this, I had that to do, right? And eventually they grew and so on and so forth, and now they're quote unquote successful. But guess what? If you own your business and if you control your business, you control your time. If you control your time, you control everything else. That is the only thing that don't make, that and land. They don't make any more of it, right? We can't control any of it anyway, but we aim to. So to that end, again, if you guys can probably pick up on this, I'm really like anti-funding. And it's because of reasons like that. Like a company that makes billions and billions of dollars, you could walk away with hundreds of millions, if not billions, and that's your goal, wonderful. But none of you, I think, would be here during this webinar if that's who you are right now. It might evolve, it might change, and who knows, maybe Sam will wake up in 2 years and be like, yeah, okay, I'm getting all the funding there is, right? Get ready for unicorn status. And that's awesome, right? If that's the case. But there's something to be said about what you're giving up along the way for the paycheck or paychecks. Okay, do we know who this person is? Come on, guys. Anybody, just take a random guess, just like a first name, throw it out there.
That the lady who made Bumble?
No, but good guess. One more.
Or Spanx? Was that another? Just thinking of female entrepreneurs.
Sorry, was that Sam? Sam, you are MVP, dude. I mean,
there it is. Yeah.
Sarah Blakely. She's the founder of Spanx, net worth $1.1 billion. Guess what? Guess how much Spanx is worth? 1.2. So how's that possible? Well, that's right. She did it herself, which is absurd. And people think, like, oh, you can't get to that $1 billion, whatever. By her, I mean, not by herself, there's a team and everything else right in between. But in the beginning, are people familiar with her story at all? I can share in 2 minutes. Okay. She essentially didn't know what she wanted to do. She was in her 20s, went and essentially got a terrible score on her LSAT. She thought she was going to be a lawyer, and then she couldn't even pass the test. And then she said, okay, well, I don't have anything else to do right now, so what else can I do? And she drove, because she's from Clearwater, Florida, drove to Disney World. That's Florida, Disney World, yeah, not land. To audition to be Goofy, like the Goofies you see on Disney that are walking around all day and, not talking and leaving. But, yeah. And they're like, the prerequisite to be Goofy, because Goofy's tall, is 5'8". She's 5'6". So she couldn't get that job. And at some point or another, she went home and she was going out to a party and she put on pantyhose and she's like, oh, this doesn't exactly fit the way I wanted to. What can I do? And she cut the bottoms off and put it underneath her jeans, creating a slimming effect. And therefore, in concept anyway, Spanx was born. But what's the amazing part about the story isn't the fact that she just did something like that creatively and that was it. Because right before she did any of that, she also worked for 7 years pushing, I think, fax machines and copiers door to door. 7 years, lugging around crap, being like, would you guys like a copier? And, everybody, obviously, how many directions can happen to a salesperson every single day, right? Went through that, then a random idea was inspired. And the way she actually, fun enough, grew Spanx, because there was no funding, she called every big kind of shop realtor, Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's, everybody else that would follow after that. And the way she got into Neiman Marcus was by cold calling nonstop. She eventually got, I think, the assistant to the buyer, and they said, can you fly out to us? She had only $5,000 in savings, Gets there, she's presenting the idea. She's got like a knapsack backpack, apparently, because there's, she's at the beginning of this thing. And the woman was losing interest. She goes, listen, can you come with me to the bathroom? And I'll just show you the product. And she's like, okay. And then she showed her, and I was like, holy crap. She got to Neiman Marcus, and eventually all the other stores came. But what she did next, I just love the story because it wasn't, she just did it and then it got glossed over. She spent the next 2 years marketing, promoting, modeling the product herself in the store, then teaching the salespeople how to do it and what the benefits are and so on and so forth. Founder, one person, not we're going to scale because we can hire 15 engineers, just her. And now she's worth, I think she's around 52 now, something like that. She's worth $1.1 billion. And she hit the $1 billion status. I think she was probably one of the youngest, like self-made bootstrap CEOs, I think of all time. And I'm not counting Kylie Jenner in that because that was.
You want to come take off for me? Go for a ride?
Sorry?
I think he just wasn't muted.
Okay. All I heard was go for a ride. I'm like, okay. Just after the presentation, I hope. Okay. Another big thing around just this kind of, I'll put you guys down here. On just running a lean business. It's just the importance of a clear vision aligning to market opportunity, right? So a lot of people talk about specifically on, oh, you got a vision, absolutely 100% yes, right? You need to have a vision obviously to build anything, but also how that aligns to market opportunity. Now, oftentimes when like even Eric and I, like when we've chatted with some early founders, people are thinking about like opening a business for their first time. It's not even so much so about like market validation just yet. They're not even thinking about that. It's just about the idea and like this idea can revolutionize X and this rhetoric around like, we're going to revolutionize this, or how many times we've heard things like, oh, we're the next Uber of this. And I'm like, Uber had a toxic culture internally and they can't turn a goddamn profit. And why do you want to be Uber, right? And a lot of people do, but whatever the case. So one thing around your vision and aligning it to kind of the market reality or what the conditions are specifically and adaptability. The great thing about sometimes having competition in the market is that you have competition in the market, right? So when this says, make sure your competition and see how you can do it, that's a typo. It should say differently, not if-friendly, whatever that is. Cheaper, faster, all three. I apologize. I really should have a D in there, but missed it. I love the fact that when we built Alta, it was literally on the back of like, I worked in this company, in this business, and I saw the inefficiencies. I saw where the ball was being dropped. I saw the customer pain points. I saw what didn't work. I saw what gave people hesitation, resistance, buyer's remorse, you name it. And I thought, well, what if I did it? But I didn't, look to scale to 1,000 people tomorrow. What if I work with 10 people who would pay me $1,000 to start? Could that work? And of course it will, because these people have already, this company, this model has proven to work to a degree already. So all you have to do is just present it a little bit differently. When you think about your own company and like your team, so right now, Alta runs, if you were to look at it from the website standpoint, it's a one-man shop, just me, right? And what you don't see is, there are people that volunteer their time. There are people that are former clients and now serve with SMEs to work with job seekers. There are other individuals who've come in and give advice from like companies they built out themselves, all pro bono, all free. And it's because I think I always equate it to the fact that like, if they can see the vision clearly, and if they can somehow find a piece of themselves in that vision to want to contribute to that growth, to want to contribute to the attachment of doing something alongside something they believe in, that can be way more valuable than any dollar spent. So again, running a lean business is really hard because you don't have the funds for it. And if you're thinking about a team themselves, like, well, how do I hire someone? You don't necessarily have to spend any money to bring someone on board if they just match, whether it's your personality, your vision, your values, or they support the idea. And it's always a matter of having a very transparent conversation, like, here's where I'm looking to go. Where do you think we should go next? Making somebody feel heard, valued, and acknowledged also goes a very, very long way. So for the last 2 years, I went from one person, essentially, right, to now I think we're about 18 people. And if I text someone right now and say, hey, listen, I've got a session later on, could you drop in because someone's looking to go into their next like senior level of product management, and you obviously are there and you're a VP, let's have a chat with them. They would do it. And it's not like, oh, how much do I get for it, and so on and so forth. So creating that relationship has been probably one of the biggest levers I've seen in my business alone. And it's, I think, honestly, somehow the best partnerships happen. Eric and I met a little while back. We just talk like normal people. Nobody's trying to sell anybody anything. And now we're in a position where we could, do something together, whatever the case may be. And now we're here. Who would have thought of that 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was? Absolutely not. And one of the big things to think about is like, if you can get one person to join you, you can get 100 more. So again, your goals are your own. I have no idea, right? I don't have transparency into your businesses. If you get one person to join, you can find another 99 or 100 people to join you, or whatever your dream is. And it's a pretty powerful thing without spending any money.
Could I add one point to your second bullet point, Albano?
Yeah.
There's this company called ComServe. They're I think like a Series B funded company, but they their CEO's name's Mac, and like I followed him for a while, so I see his posts on LinkedIn, obviously. But they're like a tool for like building communities, basically, and like helping people with that. They like relaunched their newest version of their products like last Wednesday, and like I logged onto LinkedIn, and like 100 people were like posting about ComSer, and he wrote this big article about it and published today about like how we went viral on LinkedIn and I didn't spend a single dollar doing it. He's like, these people just wanted to help us. So it's like to add to your point, like sometimes you don't even have to hire those folks. Like there are just a lot of people who will promote your product. Like they believe in the vision, like they'll help out. And I mean, getting 100 people to post your brand on LinkedIn the same time, same day is like really worked for them. It was cool.
Yeah, and then it can be something where it's targeted like that, right? Where it's like it's a one-off in terms of like a launch or promotion, or it can be like we now have this network of 20 plus people, 50 people, 100 people, whatever it could be, that once you start defining also like what they're able to contribute, it becomes a lot easier for them. They have a clear idea on like, okay, great, like I can help, and it doesn't take 40 hours a week, 100 hours a week for me. It maybe takes an hour, two, whatever kind of again the functionality can be specifically for your business. All good on that stuff so far? Any questions before we go into the next thing? Cool. Focus on generating revenue from day one, which we talked about a little bit before, but it's super, super important, right? A business core mission should be to make money. Everything else is a byproduct. Now, this is honestly, I was trying to figure out like, who said this and why do I remember it? And I found some things on Quora and it was like, Peter Drucker said this, or whoever, but I think I read this on a book by John Paul Getty III. This is somebody that they made movies recently, or a couple years back, I guess. He was like an oil tycoon, really messed up family, but he made $1 billion. And one of the big things was like, we want to make money. Everything else that comes with it, right? Money can affect. And I think there is this thing around money itself where people think, oh, but like mission first, values, and of course those things are massively important because you won't be able to build anything with passion, purpose, and so on and so forth. But profit, for example, really, really matters because it can really help to drive a lot of things forward. It makes just things easier. It really does make the world go around at the end of the day. So with the more money that you have as a business owner, the more things you can do. You can invest in your growth, you can invest in expansion, you can invest in, I don't know, contributing to your local nonprofit, to your charity, whatever it is. You can do whatever you want, right? As long as you make it. It's much harder when you are negative or you are not generating revenue to pretty much do anything. And that's when debt comes into play, and that's when funding comes into play, and that is when you are now owing. And I'm personally not a big fan of it. Also, by getting $1 for your whatever your first dollar, I should say, it validates your original hypotheses, right? If this is just an idea that you haven't executed on, you even bought one sale from, then it's still just an idea, right? It's not a business, it's a hobby. I'm sure everyone's heard that term, but like as long as you get one person to buy it, great, and they don't return it in the first 15 minutes or 24 hours, then guess what? You have a customer, and now you're in business. So it validates your hypothesis. It literally starts your company's engine, right? In a sense. Because now it's great, I'm in business. Now can I get another customer? Can I get another? Can I get another? Right. And again, like we said before on hiring, if you get one person to see your vision and values that you bring, and they can attach themselves to it and they see how they can contribute, you can get 100. Same thing with customers. You can get one, you can get 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, depending on your business. And the best part about this is like it literally boosts serotonin and endorphins, and it gives you confidence that what you're doing, that what you're thinking about all night long or in the morning, whatever, right, in your downtime driving, it's working. It's just started. It's a small ember in parts of a fire, right? But someone paid for it. And therefore, now you can do this, right? That means your landing page worked, your sales pitch worked, what you said worked, how you presented it, the features, the benefits. And that's a really amazing thing that I think a lot of founders, myself included in time when I started this stuff, I just never thought about. It's like, great, I got a sale. but you never, I think, self-reflect, and it's an important factor. And if I could give just that piece of advice, is like, think about how much work you put in before that sale happened and celebrate that after, because you're the one who did all that stuff. And now you just have to fulfill. Now you have to obviously create the successful outcome for your client. Set a milestone, then assess. So this is something that I thought for myself as well. If you're running a one-person shop, let's say, or you have a small team, but once you start anything, it's really just you, or maybe it's you and a friend. My milestone that I said in the first business that I had was like, can we do $100,000? Same thing with this. Can I sell $100,000 worth of service, worth of product, worth of my time, so on and so forth. And I think $100 bucks, not $100 bucks, $100,000. I think is a good benchmark for many. I think the kind of, when you get to the golden circle of what everybody wants to do in their business, it's $1 million. Everybody talks about how to go from 0 to 7 figures. So I think it's kind of like widely applicable to everybody here. Unless, I don't know, some of you here maybe have hit that already. Now it's on to 10 million or 100 million. But the idea is that first it's let's say 10K per month or whatever, how people want to frame it. But for me, it was, can I get to $100,000? And if I can do it all myself, then what's next? All right, so commit to doing it yourself, prove they can do it 100 times over, and it's not just a one-off fallacy or a lucky shot, right? Once you've proven the system yourself, you can then figure out, hey, what other systems do I need to eventually scale? And again, without funding, without kind of the external headaches. This is a really important question. Someone asked me once. I said, do you want to be cloned or completely removed? And I was like, isn't that the same thing? And they're like, not exactly. Clone is more of like someone who just does what you do to a degree, or do you want to be somewhere on the beach completely removed to the point where you're just like looking at your bank account with a check or cash that's coming in, and you have nothing to do with the business again. So some of you maybe are just starting right now, or maybe the company's a bit more mature, I have no idea. But with that said, it's a question that I want everyone to just think of, and hopefully it stays with you over time, whether we connect again or not. But do you want to be cloned? Do you want to be removed? And the answer is like, no, I don't want to be cloned, and no, I never want to be removed. Then I applaud you, because you're about to spend potentially the next decade building your company. And I think it's a wonderful thing if you can stay with it. Again, we talked about hiring before and like building a team, but hiring can happen with little to no money up front. This is more of a tactical way to think about it. So on top of networking and talking to people who you connect with really quickly and sharing your vision, another I hate to use the word, but like cheap way to do it is just utilizing what's at hand, right? So flexible contract workers, Upwork, Fiverr, even Facebook or Facebook. What happens to this presentation? Jesus, no spell check. Good stuff, Eric. So we've got Facebook, LinkedIn, Fiverr, Upwork, right? You can get people, and again, quality has to be there, of course. So yes, it does take a little time to vet and sift through, and sometimes you have to cross your fingers around like who's working on the thing that you want to be executed on. But again, when you don't have a lot of money, or you don't want to spend a lot of money, it's a great way to at least get something done. So again, execution happens more efficiently. The small business development centers, do we know about this? And feel free to unmute yourselves and say yes or no. No one's saying yes or no. Excellent. Good. I can't see half of you. So I'm going to assume no. So small business development centers is something actually I had no idea about until I watched a show on Paramount called, which I recommend everybody does as well, called Undercover Billionaire. And that's not like Undercover Boss. It was, yeah, sorry. Okay. Cool. Undercover Billionaire basically was this goal. There's an entrepreneur named Glenn Stearns. He was like in the lending and loan space. And he had made something like $500 million. So technically, I don't think he was a billionaire, but whatever. So the pilot shows basically him. He gets dropped off in Philadelphia. So anyone here's from Philly? Yeah, buddy. And he's got a truck, a cell phone, and $100. And throughout the entire show, the whole goal is for him to create a business that's valued at $1 million in 90 days. If he can't, he then has to put up $1 million of his own money, right? And then contribute it to whatever, X, Y, and Z. It is one of the best shows I've seen in terms of how real some of this stuff gets. Like he's sleeping in his truck. He's buying like ramen noodles. And I'm not saying like that's the reality that all of us face in a sense, but it truly shows like his ingenuity and the scrappiness and the ability to say like, well, I need to then do this and this and this. And he starts off by like hunting for scrap metal because he can then sell it and use that money to then buy a car that's worth only like $2,000. Then he flips that car for $4,000. Then it's, hey, I need a space to live. And one of the big things around, and long story short, he gets there and brings people into the business with no money whatsoever. I don't want to spoil it for you. Just have fun watching it. One of the big things was something called a small business development center. And I hadn't seen this before. And obviously he's got the camera on him, and he goes, one of the great things about a small business development center is that they are there to help small businesses, and it is completely free. So some of the colleges and universities that you may have gone to might have a partnership with an SBDC. I know mine did here in New York. And all you have to do is email someone with the contact info there and say, hey, I have a business that I'm working on. I'm at the beginning of it. Here's my idea. Would love to connect with someone in whatever department you want, research, marketing, etc. And all that happens next is they set up a phone call with you. They learn more about your business and they say, what do you need from us? And market research, like we said, in terms of like learn and build and measure, is something that can take a lot of time. It's something that maybe takes a lot of time for you. So even outsourcing it to a contractor on Upwork maybe doesn't make sense. Like, why spend anything? The SBDC has research librarians. So in my example, right, I'm in New York, they said we have an entire team of research librarians in Albany that we can send your request over. About a week or two in between, and they came back with a trove of information. I mean, it was a Google folder, and it could have been 45 different files and articles and studies and whatever. Highlighted also, like, here's what you should pay attention. Based on your thing, here's what we recommend. That kind of labor would cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you had your own team that you'd hired, or at least a couple hundred to maybe low thousands, right? If you're paying somebody by the hour, whatever the case may be. So if you take anything I've said so far, please write this down. Small business development centers can be super, super helpful at $0 upfront. And for me, in my capacity, all I use them for was research essentially. And then it was, some marketing ideas and things like that. But I imagine whatever kind of your pain point or gap in the business in which you necessarily don't have the funds or the time for right now, you can utilize this kind of service, which is really great. When you're thinking about talent as well, just generally, if you're bringing anybody on board, I always think about like, what is singular talent? So thinking of the specialist versus generalist. And that talent has to be good in a sense. They have to be able to execute on things that you cannot. So let's say, Eric, in my opinion, is a positioning expert. That's his experience, right? He can write copy like no other. He can position messages in a way that I simply can't. So if I said, Eric, let's partner up on something, and can you help out with kind of just crafting messages that will convert people in a compelling email or landing page or whatever, that's the guy to do it, right? I'm sure he's many talents after that, but his single talent that comes to mind first is what he can do really, really well, which he's done obviously with Thrive and everything else in between. These things that senior talent it's a must-have. It's not a preferred, because you're going to waste time talking to people that necessarily are potentially fine for the job, but they won't be able to, again, execute on the thing that you need. And if you've heard me say execute 12 times during this webinar, if not 100 at this point, it's because there's always a sense of urgency when you're building your own thing. So you have to make sure that you do it, again, especially doing it lean, do it as quickly as possible, right? Test, iterate, execute as quickly as you can. That way you can grow that much faster.
I missed this, Albano. Tyler asked like a minute or two ago, what were you having them research?
Oh, yes. So that's a great question. I was having them research specifically what the competitive landscape looked like, what some of the reasons why are like my ICP at the time. I'll give you the core example of what it was. I was looking at why the demographics were so low when you're looking at employees of color in tech. The diversity numbers at some of these bigger tech companies are an absolute joke. They're all under 10%, if like 5%. And when you get to like middle and upper management, it's, I think, under 2% from what I remember from the research. And I was specifically looking to see if I could bridge a gap with some of the services, focusing first on talent that was coming from more low socioeconomic backgrounds, people that generally don't have that kind of cookie cutter background in tech, if you will. And a large majority of that, unfortunately, is when you're looking at someone who is, say, early 20s, mid 20s, early 30s, if not older, who's coming from a background necessarily where, they're a person of color. And it's a whole other conversation. I'm happy, by the way, if you ever want to chat offline about that stuff, because it's absurd that that's the case. But I just asked them kind of like, hey, can you look around kind of one, what does competitive landscape look like? What are some of these boot camps that exist right now? And what are their kind of success rates look like? Who are the people that are being successful specifically? Because I wanted to prove this hypothesis of like, I guarantee you 9 out of 10, right? You're not really looking at a person of color there. And that's kind of what it was. And it's also based on my own experience of like working at these places, and you just, you don't see it, unfortunately. And like to a degree is me identifying kind of a gap in the market that we can also help and work in. But it's the research that came back, like I wouldn't have known any of those measurements or those numbers or percentages if it wasn't for the SBDC. The folder was massive, and it's more than I could have ever found in 6 months myself. And they did it within about, I think it was like a week and a half. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, I'm not really checking the chat, so thanks
Yeah.
for.
He said amazing. Thank you in the chat.
Got it. Okay, performance-based spending. I know we're kind of coming up on time, so please, Mike, we really are coming up on time. I talk a lot. My bad, guys. If I can't get to a question right now, please message me, and I'm happy to, can connect on LinkedIn and things like that. And Eric has my contact, so happy to connect and chat any other time besides this. Performance-based spending. So this is what it sounds like. This is a model that I always think about, is like you get paid for done, right? You get paid for the thing that you're accomplishing. So think about hiring again in teams and scale, so on and so forth on a lean business model. One of the things that I've seen work really, really well, and especially when it comes to like sales and marketing, sometimes there are always things that you can quantify. There are always things that you can measure. There's certain metrics that you can always push against someone's performance. So what I've seen work really well, because again, you don't have the funds to hire somebody full-time or even part-time sometimes, you create a split, you create a commission, you create something where someone has a sense of ownership around it and say like, hey, if you do this, you get this much. If you do past that point, you get this much, which are all kind of sales structure cycles. And I found this to be really, really effective, because you might spend, you have to think about, your own time to dollar ratio as well, which I don't have to get into right now, but you might spend a lot of time trying to do everything yourself, and you're going to get essentially burnt out. But if, again, you go into that senior talent person who has, let's say, again, Michael, just, picking out of nowhere here, but if Michael is like one of the top salespeople in his company, or started doing sales and is fairly successful in his own business, right? Maybe Michael and I can have a partnership where, hey, it's 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, whatever it is, to sell the core product that I just started selling myself. But he can do so much more than me because he has more time, more volume, more experience, so on and so forth, and he gets rewarded for it every single time. So, thinking about lean, you don't always have to go for, your own budget, your own constraints, specifically financially. You can always remove them by just getting a little bit creative. And the best thing about it is, like, once you get one sale for yourself as a business, once the person that works with you or for you gets a sale or gets some sort of desired outcome, success becomes addictive. Because if you can do it once, you can do it 100 times over and over and over. In this business, when I first started, I made $11,000, I think, in the course of like 3 hours. Committed, right, revenue, because I just sold the high ticket program in terms of coaching. And I looked back, and I told Eric this story a couple of days ago, and I said, it would have taken me 3.5 months working 45-hour weeks at the job I was doing to make $11,000 pre-tax, right? So once you do it in 3 hours or 3 days, even, like, or 3 weeks, right? It changes everything. Your brain gets rewired to be like, let's do it again and again, and let's do it 10 times over. Okay, I promise, I know I'm wrapping up here. Tool software automate where possible. So one thing, obviously, there's a lot of AI automation and things like that, and we could have filled 10 slides with this stuff, but these are some of the things that I use. Are we familiar with system.io? Yes, no, cool. System.io, basically, you can create landing pages, campaigns, newsletters, funnels. It's completely free, and you can set up 3 distinct funnels. So I recommend anybody that's watching this to try it out. It's kind of like Go High Level, if we've heard of that software, but it's like very, very simple in comparison. It's someone told me, I was trying to use Go High Level myself at one point or another, and they're like, have you used it before? And I said no, and said it's like giving the keys to a monkey of a Ferrari when they just learn how to ride a bicycle. And I was like, did you just call me a monkey with a Ferrari? What the hell? But fair point. It's very complex sometimes, right? It depends on where you're using. I know for Thrive, Kajabi, right, is the main one. Yeah, it's popular. But System specifically is completely free, which is amazing. So some of the functionalities, yes, maybe they're going to be left to be desired in the free version of it. But if you, let's say, have 3 pricing packages of your product and offers and assets, guess what? Each one of them can have a funnel, right? Or one of them is your lead magnet, but 2 others are specifically other landing pages you need to go to be able to execute on something. MailerLite is another one. This is basically like ConvertKit's cousin that nobody knows about, also free. Also very, very functionally, like does a great job. Glasp is a YouTube summary Chrome extension, which I use. So sometimes you've got something that you really want to watch or learn from, which is an hour and 18 minutes, and you don't have that time. I especially don't now as a new dad. So I will literally just hit, and it integrates with ChatGPT and Claude. So it will take the text immediately as soon as you don't have to watch even like you just watch 2 seconds of the thing, and it will generate the text for you, and it will summarize basically your instructions of like summarize in 5 to 10 bullet points, everything. And then you can segment it and so on and so forth. Riverside FM, have we all used this? Yeah, I know Eric has. Yeah, he's done a lot of the webinars with this. It's great. Beehive, which I've also misspelled. Maybe this is the autocorrect here. Jesus Christ. Beehive is all for newsletters, which I think really got popularized over the last 2 years. A lot of people use it to push their newsletters out. It's actually very, very cost effective. And what I love about that is when you go to their page, I don't know if anyone is using it here, but they have the bar of like, how many subscribers would you want if you're charging X amount? And you literally visually see how much money you can make if you're charging for your newsletter, essentially. Facebook is Facebook, right? So you can always have a business page there and use Facebook to utilize leads that way. WordPress website is what I use specifically. Functionality is pretty great. There's a bit of a learning curve, but once you get into it, it's great. Notion for all kind of documentation, company wikis, and all that stuff. You can have a lot of things on there before they say like you've hit your limit to scale to the next level. And then Store for TikTok is a Chrome extension, basically. I don't know if a lot of us spend time on TikTok, but if you need content ideas and you need to see kind of what's working, this essentially goes into the accounts in which you're following, let's say, top 10 competitors, creators, whatever, and it will then filter to like the top videos that are proven, that have gone viral, whatever the case. So you can create your own version of that and push some of that content that will get eyeballs and conversions ideally. And I say $0 to $100 because none of this stuff costs more than, let's say, $100. And then lastly, it's growth pillars. So these are 3 things that I focus on a lot. Again, we're looking at things that, again, don't take a lot of money, but potentially maybe take some time. Organic social media marketing, obviously a big one. It's completely free. Just turn your phone on and you're good to go. Partnerships. So partnerships, talking about like levels of distribution. And I'm speaking 100 miles per hour, but I know it's over time, so I don't want to keep us, and I know we've got places to run. Partnerships are a big thing, right? Think about distribution centers for your business. And partnerships can work in the exact same way around what we talked about when you're hiring, let's say, an SDR for your business, right? The idea about partnerships, whatever your business may be, think about what is adjacent to you, what is complementary to you. Meaning, like if I'm selling a career coaching service, maybe the people that I work with, and this is a partnership I closed recently, is an auto applier tool for job applications. Because guess what? They have 1 million users, and those are all people you can market against, all free, right? Or you can do a trade-off where it's, hey, you know what? You have this course hosting platform, this community building platform. Let me host my digital course on there, but I want the free membership for 6 months or a year. And I will write promotional posts about this and promote as much as I can to essentially our users, but also like on social media and things like that. And distribution levels become amazing because, the people are already there. And all you need again is more eyeballs. And you don't have to pay ads all day long or Google ads or whatever the case may be. And acquisitions. So acquisitions is what it sounds like, right? You might spend a little bit of money, but Eric and I were talking about this recently. There are ways to acquire customers without, again, having to spend it on ads. So instead of taking $500 or $1,000 or $5,000, trying to test Facebook all day long, another way to do it is to look at assets where, again, your customers may be. So Facebook groups, newsletters are a big thing. Any sort of community element where it's not driven by a face, meaning it's not like a guru out there. It's not freaking Grant Cardone being like, hey, y'all, where's my money? Like, you're not going to win against that guy just because sheer volume of crap that he pushes. But if you go to someone who's building an audience of, let's say, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, they have a Facebook group where they share tips. Great. It's a very simple thing to do, which we're executing on now, and I've seen it work myself. You just say, hey, you've got a great group going on. You don't have to DM every single person in that group. You can, if you have the funds, if you have the limit of what you guys can agree upon, you can say, have you thought about selling this? A lot of people start a newsletter because they want to write. It's not always about business or ad revenue. So if you get them early enough, it's, hey, you have 1,000 subscribers. Have you ever thought about selling this? And it's crazy to think that even for a couple $100, you can gain 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, depending again what it is, customers that are already primed for your product because they're following X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense? Cool. And I think that's pretty much it. So I know we're over time, and I know there's not a lot of time for questions, but again, thank you so much. I know I spoke at 1,000 miles per hour, so if anybody didn't catch something, this is being recorded, so hopefully Eric can send it to everybody. But that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for making the time to show up today, and great to connect with everybody.
Thanks so much.
Great presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks everybody for coming. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. We'll send this recording out afterwards, but thanks Albano, that kicked ass.
Man, I'm gonna go have a drink. That was insane. It's freaking... I'm gonna say I started to panic. I was like, it's 1:58. My God, I have 4 slides left. But thank you guys for sticking with me, and hopefully it was of some value. And again, if you have any questions, please find me. And I mean this on LinkedIn. It's where I'm most active. I don't really do the other ones so much right now. I should, but time. And just let me know. I would love to hear about your businesses. At 1,000%. Anywhere I can help, any direction I can point you, any referrals, anybody in my network that maybe can be beneficial. Please just feel free to ask. That's all it takes. Just a message.
Albano, Tyler asked if where can we find you and talk further? Is it okay if I guess I can share your email?
Please share the email and any kind of contact info. Yeah, you don't have to like wait for me to accept your LinkedIn crap. Just email me. It's fine. Or let me do this for everybody because it doesn't matter to me. Just shoot me a text. Yeah, nice and easy. And if everyone wants to jot down a number, here it is. Or maybe just put it in the chat if you guys if that's easier. God, where's the chat? Jesus Christ, I feel like an old man. Cool. Here it is. Man, if you log out, if anybody did, you're going to miss this number and your life will never be the same. Just kidding. Here it is. 646-951-7660. Shoot me a text. I guess just introduce yourself and say, hey, I was on the webinar. And we're good.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.
For doing it. And thanks everybody for coming. See you guys.
Take care.